technically Duckboat Dispatch episode 5, but we'll call this 4.5 because it's a special edition episode. It's just myself, Tom Christopherly. Josh is not here. Sarah is not here. They're both at work. Josh is currently driving back from an event that we attended together today. But there was some breaking news in the Boston sports world that we had to talk about. We have alluded to it for a while. We talked about it on this week's episode of the podcast, which you can find on YouTube at the Duckboat Dispatch. What is going on with the Bruins head coaching search? And today, June 5th, at about 9 o'clock, we finally got an answer. They announced Marco Sturm is the 30th head coach in Bruins franchise history. 4th coach in 3 years. It's first-time head coach. They are the last team to officially hire a head coach in the NHL. So if you can't tell, I'm not too thrilled about this head coaching hire. And there's something against Sturm, but I am a hockey casual. I will acknowledge that about myself. So joining us on the pod today for the first time, we have Matthew Skillings. He's a good friend of mine. He has played hockey his entire life. He covered UMass Amherst men's hockey at his time at UMass Amherst. This guy loves hockey. He listens to Spittin' Chicklets whenever he gets the chance to. He's been retweeted by Spittin' Chicklets before for some of his hockey coverage, which is super cool. So Skillings, it's great to have you on the pod. How you doing, bro?
I'm great, man. You went full Matthew on that. I like that. Might
full
have to go
legal
that.
Name.
Yeah.
Full legal
I was also
name.
concerned you were going to mess up Marco Sturm's name as well.
Yep. And
Marco
while I was
Sturm.
saying it, I was very unconfident in what I was saying, but I was like, you got to go with it. Fake it till you make it is what they taught me in college. So Sturm, how initial thoughts, reactions to, when I'm assuming you weren't surprised when you saw the news this morning.
No, not at all. Face value, I like the hire. I like Marco Sturm because he has that experience with younger guys, which is what this team is now. It's going to be made up of guys who are 22 to 27, either coming into the league or, young guys who have bounced around and need a new home outside of like David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, Charlie McAvoy. You're really looking at, probably one of the younger rosters in the NHL. So at face value, right? Like I like Marco Sturm's value as a coach of young guys. Where I get frustrated, obviously, with my with the initial reaction is like he's been in the talks for like a month now. It feels like it's been like years, but if you're gonna pull the trigger on Sturm, right? Why not 3 weeks ago? Like, why did you have to wait until the day after the first game of the Stanley Cup Final, which was an electric game last night, by the way? But, it's what the Bruins' upper level management is trying to do is such a mystery, which is why it concerns me that I'm thinking he's going to be a scapegoat more than a developer of these young guys.
So when you say scapegoat, I think you make a great point because the last 4 head coaches have all been scapegoats. Jim Montgomery went into the season, Bruins started off a lot slower than we were expecting to, and he was fired not even midway through the season, and then a week later he's hired by the Blues, and the Blues are one of the best teams in the second half of the NHL season. It's not a coincidence because of that. He's a good head coach. Bruce Cassidy led them to their last Stanley Cup appearance, a Game 7 loss in 2019, and he was there for 6 years, and he was sent out the door, and then most recently, Joe Sacco, who was kind of the real sacrificial lamb because he was the interim head coach, hoping to turn things around on a roster that just could not be turned around. They just did not mesh well. I think Marchand was a problem in the locker room. I stand with Richard Keefe on that report, and I will die on that one. And then you just have bad.
Keefe, but that, nah, come on.
I trust Scoop Keefe. He's never been wrong.
Captain right there.
And I just don't think he was fit for the captain role. Sarah, who's been on the show, she makes a great point that Marchand looks like he's playing freer in Florida than he ever had as a captain of the Boston Bruins because he's just able to be that rat of the team, which is his perfect role. He's a gritty glue guy, and he's a rat. He's going to make dirty plays. He's going to be chippy. He's going to hit you, and that is Brad Marchand hockey through and through. So I don't blame Marchand for not being able to adjust to maybe trying to change his style of play in the latter half of his career to fit more of a captain leadership role. But if you go back to the coaching, 4 coaches in 3 years is not where you want to be as a franchise in any sport. It just screams dysfunctional, and that's what this Boston Bruins front office has been the past 5 years or so. They have been dysfunctional, and it all falls on the shoulders of Don Sweeney and Cam Neely. And I think the only reason they extended Don Sweeney is to be able to hire a head coach so that they could say, hey, you're not going to be a one-and-done head coach, especially a guy who's getting his first bid in the NHL as a head coach. He doesn't want to be a one-and-done, seen as a scapegoat. He wants to add something to the organization and, show his merits to eventually hopefully get a future job, because I don't think Sturm's going to be here when the next time they win a Stanley Cup. Maybe the next time they make the playoffs, but not the next time they win a cup.
Yeah, and I saw this stat. I don't know when it was. I don't know the exact stat either. But there's something like 3 NHL coaches currently that have been with their team for more than like 4 years. Like the NHL, more than any other pro sports league, is just like, you are hired to be fired, and you're hired to be fired quickly. One bad season, you're done. You're out. Jim Montgomery, like, he was not the problem at all with this team. Like, they come into the season with like fringe playoff aspirations, and obviously they weren't getting it done at the start of the season. That's not on Monty. That's on, injuries to Marchand for the first half of the season. McAvoy's gone. Hampus Lindholm was gone for a while. You had Swayman underperforming, Zadorov underperforming, Elias Lindholm it was just a cluster of bad stuff. So that's not on him. Marco Sturm's going to be looking for length, right? Like he doesn't want to be a scapegoat because, like you said, it's his first try in the NHL as a head coach. I do think there's a lot of potential for him to grow with this current Bruins roster as it's set and how it will become in the next 2-3 years with draft picks and rookies coming up. And I hope they give him a chance to do that because, a bad season this year, they're not a playoff team. They're going to be a bottom 5 team in the NHL for the next 2 or 3 years. Don't look at that as Marco Sturm is messing up. Look at it as he's building something. And if, players hate him, he's not doing a good job, that's different. But when they're bad, but they're growing because they have a ton of young players, that's not on Marco Sturm, so let him grow. That's my hope for Don Sweeney and Cam Neely when they decide, what they're doing 2 years down the road.
And I think you make a great point that they pick if you look at one of the positives of this, they hire a guy whose expertise, you would say, is dealing with young players, as he spent a lot of time in the AHL, which is typically younger guys or guys in the back end of their career just kind of playing for the love of the game. Yeah. So I think that aspect of it, molding young men into professional hockey players and showing them how to operate in the NHL, I think he'll bring great experience in that aspect. However, if the front office, and I don't think it's really the front office's fault for this, if he is kind of a scapegoat after a year, maybe a year and a half, I think it'll be more on the Jacobs family putting pressure on Sweeney and on Neely, because I think their jobs I think they are on the hot seat through and through this upcoming season. Next year, maybe they get the extra year. I know they extended him, but I don't have a lot of faith in them being here for a while as well for this whole rebuild, unless they strike gold on the Sturm hire and they strike gold in the draft this year.
I mean, at least from my perspective, that 2-year extension for Don Sweeney says something about the Jacobs family trusting him at least a little bit. They're in the worst spot they've been right now since the mid-2000s. And you don't extend a guy to build back a franchise if you don't think he's going to be able to do it, right? And I think they're banking on him being able to do it because you don't want a lame duck sitting in office when you're rebuilding. So I think the end of 2 years, you're hoping that they've drafted and developed enough talent that they're somewhat better, and Sweeney is, going to be a big part of that. But back to Marco Sturm as well, like, even more than his AHL time, I think a big thing is how much time he spent with the Germany national hockey program. I believe he was the general manager of the U20 team that goes to World Juniors, and he coached in the Olympics as well. Like, he's developing a lot of young talent from an up-and-coming hockey country. And I think that's honestly where so much of his young player development has come from.
Yeah, and I would have to disagree on the Don Sweeney kind of them showing them the faith at the contract extension. To me, the extension was more of they weren't able to hire a head coach because head coach candidates were nervous about going somewhere where the GM had a year left on his contract and was the lame duck, as you said. And then maybe after the one season, Sweeney's gone, they fire Neely, whatever it may be, they're gone. And then the new GM wants to bring in his own head coach. My own manager.
Point there was like, if they're gonna fire Sweeney, now was the year. What, you might as well hire a new GM. Maybe he doesn't like Marco Sturm. I would be fine with another coach. There's gonna be a few guys like Rod Brindamore might not be in Carolina anymore after this. Like they've had a tough run in the Eastern Conference Finals the last 4 times they've been there. I think you could have gone in a different direction where you hire that new GM to bring in the new coach, which I wouldn't have minded. I also don't mind extending Sweeney because I'm sneakily like a Sweeney advocate. I don't think he's been as bad as people have been making him out to be. Like he's made some good trades. The Bruins have just underperformed for him. Like 2019, 2022, and 2023 when they were supposed to be so good. He put the pieces in place. That 2023 team was unbelievable, and they completely sold it to the next up and coming dynasty that was the Florida Panthers. But that's on the team, you know. It's not on Don Sweeney. He put the pieces in place for him to be good.
Yeah, and you mentioned Sweeney's ability to trade, and that is his strong suit as a GM. He is he is a weasel around the trade deadline in the NHL. He is phenomenal at making the right moves at the right time and getting the right pieces or getting the right assets for the future. However, he is a terrible drafter. And you can't even argue, like, you just look at the facts of the players he has drafted in the past decade he's been here. The last hit he had was David Pastrnak, and he kind of backdoored his way into that draft pick. And before that, that's kind of the reason they're in the state they are right now, is he was unable to draft the pieces for the future when Bergeron was here, when Marchand was here, when Char was here. He was unable to draft the right pieces to pass the torch to the next generation of Bruins superstars. And again, he lucked his way into Pastrnak. So that's why I'm concerned about Sweeney being here for the rebuild, because it's largely going to be through the draft, and he's a terrible drafter.
That's honestly a great point. Like you look at even the guys they have that are up in the NHL now that they have drafted, like Mason Lohrei, who they drafted a few years ago. He had the worst plus minus in the NHL this year. He was horrible. I don't think he's that bad of a prospect, but like, come on, like that's atrocious. Fabian Lysell has not panned out the way you hoped he would. You're just diddling around with Matt Poitras, and those are the three good draft picks you've had. Other guys have never even made it to Providence. Like it's genuinely very frustrating. So now that they have the number 7 overall pick, I'm hoping like go after the guy you want. Like don't fall back into whoever that, you know, the next guy in line is at that number 7 spot. Trade back if you want. Get a couple more solid picks in the late first round. I think there's a good amount of guys in the late first round that are going to be impact players in the NHL. Like, do something with intention. Don't just slip back. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's a lot of what he's done because they've been drafting late in the rounds and in every round in the drafts the last 10, 15 years because they have had good seasons.
Yeah, so when you speak of the draft, you obviously know way more about college hockey players than I will ever forget in my lifetime. The way you covered UMass, I would read you did great work covering UMass men's ice hockey team. You know way more about college players coming into the draft. And I know in conversations we've had, you know, off camera, you know, just in our daily life, talking about it, the top 3 is where you want it to be. There is 3 guys in this draft that you're like, okay, these are the 3 guys you want. After that, there's a tier down. At what point, because if the Bruins are drafting at 7, they'd technically be in that second tier. At what point would it kind of drop down to like a third tier of players where if the Bruins are going to trade back, I don't want them to move past this pick?
I mean, it's a tough look. Like, I think there's the top 4 picks, Matt Schaefer, James Higgins, Michael Misa, Porter Martone. Those are all locks in the top 4. They could go in really any order, but that 5 through 10 range, I don't love any of those players. Like the number 7 guy on Bob McKenzie's list right now is Roger McQueen, who was injured for a lot of the season with the Brandon Wheat Knights in the WHL. And I forget if he was even on that World Juniors team, but that was obviously a disappointing, you know, Canadian World Juniors team. I like a lot of the guys in the bottom of the first round. Sasha Boumedienne is going to be at Boston University this year. He's an incredible forward. He was at North Dakota last year, transferred back east out towards Boston. I would not hate to move to the bottom, to the 20s, get, you know, a few more second round picks, build the base with volume and not talent, unless you really love that guy at 7. You have to love the guy at 7 if you're picking there, you know?
Yeah, and with the amount of holes they have to fill, why not move back, acquire as many picks as possible, and then just grab the guys you like in the 20s, early, you know, second round, third round, whatever it may be in the NHL draft. I don't hate that strategy. It's just then, do we trust Sweeney to make the right guy, or pick the right guy?
No problem.
No, there's not a lot. If you go off historical, you know, odds, no. But at some point, you know, we're gamblers. At some point, he's due to hit, right? He has to eventually draft a good pick, a good draft pick. And you made another good point, as these guys get drafted and go play a few more years at college. They're not going to come to the Bruins. You know, they're not saving the Bruins next year. They're gonna. If you were holding out hope for the Boston Bruins to be good in the next 2-3 years, lose the hope now, because these guys are not going to come to the pros for another year or two. It's just the way college, you know, NHL draft works and the farm system, whatever you want to call it, the way they feed into the NHL. So it's going to take time. And I'm just curious of how much patience the Jacobs family is going to have not being able to sell those playoff Bruins tickets. They don't get either of the playoffs with the Bruins or the Celtics this year. That's where they make most of their money, is on the sale for the tickets. Concessions, jerseys at the stadium, things of that nature. The get-in price. How much patience is the Jacobs family going to have
with Sweeney?
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, you have to let him run out the end of this 2-year extension. I think like firing the GM when you're in the middle of the rebuild is just such a bad sign, and it's a true sign that you don't have any confidence in what's going on with your rebuild, because that's what it is. It's a rebuild. They're gonna let him run out the next 2 years of this extension. I don't know what you could possibly not. I just completely lost my train of thought. But they'll let him run out the 2 years. That's basically my point.
Would you have preferred they go with the whole new GM and head coach combination instead of putting Sweeney with I know it's his fourth coach in third year, but I don't know how many coaches in his full tenure as the GM.
Yeah, I personally would have liked new GM, new head coach. I don't hate the Marco Sturm selection, but the fact that it took 6 weeks after all these rumors was the most frustrating part. Like, you are in a new era of the Boston Bruins right now, and they're still doing the same kind of incesty. You're bringing back Marco Sturm had a stint here for 6 years back in the 2000s. Like, why does it have to be a guy who played here? Like, go out and get somebody you want. Stop with the whole, Cam Neely's been fine over his tenure here, but he played here. Like, there's so much incest within the organization that I feel like they need to move away from now that, Bergeron's gone, Char's gone, Marchand's gone, everything is gone. You're blowing up. Start new. Like, you could have done away with Don Sweeney, who also played in Boston, and you didn't have to hire a guy who played here. You could have gone and got somebody else.
Yeah, and you make I don't want to cross sports too much, but it's very much Patriots signing Gerard Mayer to kind of continue the Bill Belichick train of thought. And yeah, Mike Vrabel played for Bill, but he never coached, or he never was an assistant coach on any Bill team. So it seems very much like they're just continuing to do the exact same thing, where they try to, this golden era of Bruins hockey, you may want to say, even though they only won one cup, they were competitive for a decade plus straight, they were competitive, and they just keep limping on slowly but surely after, okay, who else? It's kind of like they look at the dartboard and like, all right, what former Bruin is coaching somewhere in professional hockey? I just throw the dart at that point. And they've hit on a couple of coaches, but it just continues to be former players. Sometimes you need that outside perspective, and in the statement, Sweeney was like, he's been a Bruin. I'm paraphrasing, but he's been a Bruin. He knows the culture we have here. It's like, well, the culture you have here currently sucks, Sweeney, and it's a losing culture. Why don't you go get somebody who isn't within, the Bruin family, you might say, and completely change things up? Was there somebody else? And I know there wasn't a lot of, it's very weirdly reported, there was not a lot of Bruins head coaching rumors, but was there anyone else out there on the market that you would have preferred over Sturm?
I don't know. Like, when they were waiting all this time, I for a while I was like, they might not go with Marco Sturm or try and stick with Joe Sacco. They might just wait till the playoffs are over and see who's getting the axe where they are right now. Because I thought, I'm blanking on the Winnipeg head coach's name, but he might be gone. I thought they were looking at him, Rod Brindamore. I don't know. That's just what I thought as the playoffs went on. They weren't hiring anybody. They're probably just waiting. And now to do it when they did it was the main concern for me. Yeah.
And then lastly, before we wrap up, the Bruins being the last team to hire a head coach, to me, it shows that they're not a destination. No coach wants to come here because they know it's just a cluster F. So does that worry you in the long run, that as long as Sweeney is here, and again, you think he'll run out he's got 3 years left in his contract after the 2-year extension, does that worry that you, for the next 3 years, that people aren't going to want to come here because it's just dysfunctional?
I don't know that it's as much people don't want to come here as it is the Bruins just toying around with their food. You know what I mean? Like, I think Marco Sturm probably would have been A-okay with, Don Sweeney calls Marco Sturm 6 weeks ago and says, hey, Marco, we'd love for you to be the new head coach. He's probably saying yes right there. Like, I don't think that's the lack of destination. I think it's the lack of vision from Sweeney and the lack of purpose in what he's doing that is the most frustrating part. I don't think it's become less of a destination. Like, this ownership and the general manager in the front office, they've all been there during 15 years of success in Boston. Like, it's not like it's a bad place anymore. Or it's not a bad place now. Um, it's more just about the internal struggle to do stuff with purpose and intent than it is anything else, I think.
All right, and that's Matt Skillings on the Duckboat Dispatch. First time Skillings has been on. It will not be his last. He is our hockey insider. He's not a professional one, but he is ours, and then we will call him that because we love Skillings here. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, Skillings. Any final thoughts on the Bruins or whatnot? You know, the Marco Sturm hiring? I don't think it's going to matter at all.
Yeah, it's going to be a kind of a wasted season next year. You might as well get every prospect you have in the system and just bring them up, honestly. Be bad, let the 19 to 23-year-olds play, have a full season in the NHL. If you suck, you get another top draft pick. Next year's draft class is supposedly pretty stacked. This year's kind of a 50-50. Yeah, just be bad next year. Throw the axe on everything. Start anew. Bring all the prospects up. Be bad. Let them develop, and let Marco Sturm take his time developing these guys. That's fine.
And then one last thought just came to me. You mentioned, wasted season next year. At what point do they have to start worrying about Pasta's window closing?
I mean, you got him locked up for the next 5 years, maybe 6. I could be wrong on that, but he's not, the way he plays the game, he's going to be good until he's 40. He does not engage in a lot of physical contact. The things he's good at are his hands and his shot, which are two things that don't really, disappear with age. Speed goes away, physicality goes away, but hands and shot don't. 5 years from now, when he's towards the end of his contract, they should be back to a contending team if everything goes right. I'm hoping he's a big part of developing and helping these young guys develop, because he has so much experience in the playoffs and playing through so many NHL seasons. I'm not really concerned about his window closing, because, I mean, just hopefully, and this would be end any trust I have in Don Sweeney. You're bad next year and you use David Pastrnak as a trade piece to get a bunch of prospects and send him to a good team. Do not do that. Let him be part of the rebuild. Like, if that happens, then I'm on the fire Sweeney train. Yeah.
All right. You heard it from Matt Skillings here. Never trade Pasta. Pray to God Sweeney can hit a pick, and hopefully Sturm isn't a scapegoat head coach. That's episode 4.5 of the Duckboat Dispatch. Make sure you follow us on Instagram. We're going to be making a TikTok soon. I keep saying it. I have to do it at some point. It's on my things of list to do. I work the next 10 days in a row. I will get to it. I promise. Subscribe to our YouTube page. Make sure you follow Matt Skillings at Matt Skillings on Twitter, I believe. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Matt_Skillings on Twitter.
Matt_Skillings. And then what is it? Skillings13 on Instagram. He'll be tagged in the post, so make sure you show Skillings some love. Make sure you tune back in next week. Myself, Josh, Sarah will all be back. A bunch of breaking NFL news happening in the past 24 hours. Terry McLaurin might want to be traded. Aaron Rodgers supposedly signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers on Friday. So we'll dive deep into all that. And who knows where the hell the Red Sox will be 6 days from now, 5 days from now. I'll probably be complaining. And what the Tom Thibodeau firing means for Joe Mazzulla. All in episode 5 coming out next week. So make sure you tune back in for that.